evening. If you've just joined us, this is a special edition of Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you. We were speaking to Thomas Fan, chairperson of Bersih 2.0, and activist Hishamuddin Rais. They've just taken a quick breather now to perhaps calm down a little bit, and we're going to discuss. We've got William Case on the line. William Case is a professor and head of the School of Politics, History and International Relations at the University of Nottingham Malaysia. William, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, in 2018, 2 years ago, you had in fact warned that the Pakatan Harapan coalition should not roll out institutional and policy reforms too far, too fast, you said, or they could face an authoritarian backlash. Now, is this the crisis, the backlash that you warned of?
Well, sort of. Please don't remind me of that the presentation of a year and a half ago. But well, it's kind of a backlash, but it is not played out in precisely the way I would have expected. I thought maybe that Pakatan would have pushed its reforms too quickly, and would probably have been too egalitarian in its approach to different ethnic communities, and in this way would spark sort of an ethno-religious Malay Muslim backlash. That's not exactly what's happened. Instead, we're getting a different kind of response. The dynamic is extremely fluid at the moment. I'm not quite sure how to label it just now.
William, I want to ask you, in your assessment, have the reforms over the last 20 months been too fast, too quick? I mean, have they, in fact, demonstrated an extreme form of egalitarianism? Have they sidelined the Bumiputra agenda? All those things that you say would have gone into the mix of this backlash?
Yeah, that's your powers of recall are very good. But no, I don't think really that those reforms have gone as far as many people had hoped at the time. So I don't think that's the cause of any backlash today. There are a couple of notable improvements. I mean, if you're looking at this from a democratic or civil liberties perspective, a couple of things are good, and one of which, I guess, is that the free press seems to be better respected. And I guess also that the level of probity, the behavior amongst many of the ministers, vastly improved over the previous government. Other than that, when you think more generally about, controlling patronage, and if you think about, most recently the use of SOSMA, preventive detention, these sorts of things were very worrying. So I wouldn't say that the reforms had gone too far or too fast. No, that's not what has caused this to happen.
But looking at, so let's look at this crisis for what it is, and in your assessment, and I know the situation is quite fluid, but is this in fact the normal part of, coalition politics? Would you find a scenario such as this in a mature democracy, for instance?
You might, but we're not used to seeing this in Malaysia, that's for sure. I've got just taking an outsider's perspective here for a moment. We think way back, and this country had been very, very stable for a very long period of time. As a political scientist who comes from far away, we used to look at Malaysia and see that the most stable countries in East Asia were probably Japan, Singapore, and Malaysia, and that was the case for many, many decades. So what's happening here is sort of unexpected, and what has sort of set this off was the last election. What we've seen is a breakdown in what political scientists sometimes like to call the single-party dominant system. We don't have a dominant party anymore, but instead a new kind of coalition, and it's very, very fluid. And so we've gone away from single-party dominance, and now we have this sort of a multi-party free-for-all. And it's become much more fluid and much more unstable than what we used to see here in the Malaysian setting.
I mean, an article of faith of many of us who are liberals or count ourselves as Democrats is that democracy is a natural good. That, in fact, you don't have to look too deeply into what it promises. But is one of the trade-offs stability? Will we and should we come to terms with the fact that instability might actually become the norm rather than an aberration?
Well, again, I like the use of political models here, but political scientists don't like to make predictions, actually. Too often we are proved wrong and embarrassed. And so I can't say what's likely to unfold here in the future. But I would say that, since the decline of Barisan Nasional and the very unique set of circumstances that gave rise to that, and the kind of record that at some level they were able to establish, That's going to be very difficult to recreate. And so, okay, we've gone into a more democratic setting, but in many respects, the old regime persists. There's lots of ferment on the ground. There's lots of structural and ethno-religious tensions. And it's unclear how well democracy might be able to mediate those things. So personally, I agree with you. I think that democracy is probably the best way in which to organize political life in most instances. But it does run many risks and lots of drawbacks, and that's one of the reasons, perhaps, that democracy is under such a challenge today, and has real difficulty, in particular, in mediating relationships between rival ethnic communities.
Well, okay, so I hear you, William, about not wanting to make predictions. I'm not going to ask you to make predictions. It's a fluid situation. But what are some of the landmines that we should be looking to avoid in the coming days?
In the coming days, let's see. I wouldn't place too much importance, I don't think, on a single leader to resolve the many difficulties and challenges this country is facing. I know that leadership is capable leadership, desirable leadership is in short supply right now. But so we're all hoping that one man who's got obvious political experience and knows the infighting and the like is going to be able to stabilize and resolve the situation. But I think that's a mistake, to probably rely on a single leader to be able to resolve the kinds of challenges and contradictions and tensions that Malaysia is facing right now. So you need better institutionalization of some kind, and I'm not sure what that would look like, but at the moment you need a more stable party system, and at the same time too, I think you probably need I'm not sure. I would start with that and say that really the kind of very fluid, even chaotic party system that we see at the moment, that's got to be in some way, that's got to be institutionalized and stabilized.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, William. We appreciate you calling in so late in the evening and sharing those insights. We're going to take a quick break after this. Thomas and Hisham back in the studio with us. We're going to continue that conversation. Stay tuned to Consider This.